But now on Radio 4, it's time for Open Country, and Helen Mark is unearthing secrets in Thamesmead.
I've walked into a place which has got quite a sense of like a secret garden about it. I've walked through an archway to get into it, and there's a lovely stretch of woodland in front of me and the birds are singing. But as you look through the trees, you begin to see that there are strange shapes and mounds everywhere. And that is a little bit of a telltale sign about what this place really is. And I'm here with Jane Clark. She's a project officer with Wild About Thamesmead. Well, there's a hint. Thamesmead. I'm in southeast London, and yes, beyond the birdsong there's a rumble of traffic. What is going on in this place?
So there was a railway in the middle. It's like all circles in the middle. You have a meadow where the cordite propellant was stored in the centre. Then you have about 3 metre high banks, which was all to protect against the blast. And then you have this lovely old brick wall. It's about 2 metres high in a circle. And then that was surrounded by this lovely moat.
Which is frozen this morning.
The fish will be right there at the bottom.
And then the fringe of reeds, tall golden brown reeds, all the way around this side of the moat.
That's right, and Thamesmead is one of the best places to find reed beds in London.
That's got a lot to do with its natural history, hasn't it?
Yes,
reed beds.
Being part of the era's marshes. Yeah.
Yes.
But so here we are, and it's full of secrets, as it was when it was the arsenal. It's full of wildlife secrets now.
Wildlife secrets, historical secrets. Secrets about what went on here behind these great brick walls. There's a lovely sense of nature because we've got the early morning bird song, and alongside our morning bird calls we have the rumble of traffic, and in the air we're in the flight path of London City Airport.
Wow.
And we're here to explore a story that has been kept secret for a long, long time, but is now a place which is so much part of the community that surrounds this secret city, as once was known, Jane?
It was, and I think a lot of people that live locally in Thamesmead all have a story about coming into the Tump 53 when it didn't have a fence around it.
Tump 53.
So Tump 53 is a very strange name, isn't it?
It's quite Orwellian, isn't it?
Yes.
There's no nice names, just numbers.
That's right. Tump comes from the word like a mound or a hillock, but Tump 53, the 53 is to do with the fact that it used to be on a railway, number 53 railway, for the Royal Arsenal Artillery, and was an ammunition store at the end of that railway. And that's why it's called Tump 53. And there are many Tumps in Thamesmead, actually, but there are only a few that were put aside for nature reserve for the local people, and this is Tump 53.
So we're Tump 53 Nature Reserve in the heart of East London, and we are here for Open Country to discover a story to discover the history of this place as a royal arsenal, which dates back to Henry VIII, I believe.
That's right.
And had a major part to play in the military story of the United Kingdom. So we'll learn about the nature reserve from you, Jane, and the history from Ian Bull, who's an industrial archaeologist. Hello, Ian. Lovely to meet you. And it's those industrial shapes which are sort of lurking amongst the trees that begin to tell us the story of Tump 53. I don't think you like Tump 53, do
No.
you? You're grimacing a little bit.
It's magazine 14, structure F53. This was originally one of about 18 like this. Most of them still survive in one form or another. They were built in about 1903. There are several components. The first concerns security. That's the moat around the outside, which is still here today. Just on the inside of that, you've got the fairly high brick wall. The magazine had to be kept pretty secure, even though the arsenal itself was surrounded by a very lethal electric fence. They like to have a lot of internal security as well.
So the whole arsenal was not just this lovely little area that we're standing in now, but was a massive area here in the southeast of London, just to get a sense of that before we start to explore.
Yeah, 3¼ miles long, not quite so wide.
And it was packed with
huge amounts of ammunition and an enormous engineering factory.
Creating, developing explosives, munitions, all happening here. So it would
have
lain derelict.
And I think quite a few local people would have been in, from many stories from local people. As a child, they would go through the old ammunition dumps
That
Probably
is
find
very
lots
common.
of dangerous old explosives, but you know, it is a place that lends itself to intrigue and secrets. And I've had many sort of people coming and building dens. It's part of the rites of passage as a young child in Thamesmead to come in here.
Yes, that's very much the case. The arsenal wasn't cleared up properly after the military left. There was still a great amount of ordnance left, and an awful lot of children started digging up mementos and things. And at one stage, they actually had to have an amnesty. Bring in your ammunition.
And keeping in their bedrooms.
Well, it's quite a
Bits of
few
bombs and guns
quite a few people around here have still got cannonballs that have come up. I confess to having one at home.
Are you sure you want to do that?
Well, it's not an explosive cannonball, so I feel safe.
Come this way, Helen, because you can see the wall that Ian was talking about, how it's intertwined with the nature now,
Yeah.
which I think you'll find interesting. We've got lots of mosses, and we've got hart's tongue fern, which is this lovely glossy fern, and it's got red spores underneath. This sort of circular wall and woodland path that it is now is a fantastic nature trail, which we do a lot of monitoring with the volunteers of the different wildlife that's here. And it's incredible to think what it was and what it is now,
Oh, yeah.
and how nature, if it's given a chance, will just take over and thrive.
Right.
Just remind us again, if you would, Ian. This is an arsenal. What was it part of? When did it start? What was happening?
Well, the Royal Arsenal got going when Henry VIII purchased some land to build a gun wharf. The purpose of the gun wharf was to equip the ships that were coming out of the then new Woolwich Royal Naval Dockyard. And after that, it began to grow, and its waxing and waning reflected almost perfectly the expansion and contraction of the British Empire. Eventually, it would go up to be employing over 80,000 people. It would design and develop guns. It would design and develop explosives, mines, torpedoes.
But we're in southeast London. That was happening. That intense work was happening, well, in the middle of a city.
Indeed, it was called the Secret City. It had access to very deep water in the River Thames. It could take almost any ship up to its quays, and yet it was far enough up the Thames to be immune from naval bombardments. And that remained the case for many centuries. But then in the First World War, in 1915, one day the Luftwaffe arrived and they bombed it. And the immunity had gone overnight. From that time onwards, it was realised that the arsenal was going to have to be run down. It took a very long time for that to occur, finally finishing off in about 1992.
Very recently. And Tump 53 has become such a special place for local people. And you have so many volunteers here, Jane.
We do.
Yeah, doing all sorts of activities. Hello, what's your
Hello,
name?
Tina.
Hello, Tina. Nice to meet you. This is
Don.
Hello, Don.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
And
How
you?
are you? This is a fantastic little place. You know, driving here, it's all urban and there's factories, and then suddenly you come to this place. It's great.
And there's an escape into quietness and a little bit of somewhere to go and relax.
Yeah. So we have Steve and
Scott.
hello.
Hi.
And you run the family fishing activities here.
Yeah.
We've got Steve Roach, Tench.
Rudd, carp, tench, crusions,
What?
crusion carp.
And what's it like, coming here with members of the community and sitting on the bank of the moat and fishing
Well, it's nice
away?
to see the kids come out other than
Yeah.
sitting on playing PlayStations or Xboxes or whatever on the computer. It's fresh air. It's a lovely little place.
Isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It's nice that Jane's opened it for all of us to use.
Yeah, I mean, the whole area was actually covered with trees. You talk about Thamesmead to people that don't know it, and they say, oh, it's a concrete jungle, because they've got the impression from the films like The Clockwork Orange, from the Sweeney, which was brought down here. Lots of films down there. Overcoming images is very, very difficult, as you appreciate. But we have an area here which has over 127,000 trees listed.
Yeah.
So you've got 17 kilometres of canals. You have 5 lakes. We've got the Tump. There's lots of areas like this, and people don't know about them.
This could be a nature reserve with all its benefits for recreation, education and health and history, because it's still got its history, which is fantastic. And as you can see here, like history and nature are all intertwined.
Well, how
But we
important-
need to get that core group of people to actually establish the feeling of the Tump, the feeling of the history of it, and to make it part of their life.
The concrete wall over there is the Thames flood barrier. The river's on the other side of that.
I'm with Ian Bull again at Crossness Pumping Station. It's taken about 10 or 15 minutes to get here in London traffic, but we've travelled a fair distance, and all the time you were saying this was part of the arsenal, this was part of the arsenal. We're talking about a massive operation.
Yeah. We've come about a further 1.5 miles from Tump 53 out to the eastern end of the arsenal, which was known to some people in the arsenal as Land's End. A pretty bleak spot in some people's opinion, because there's still quite a lot of fairly scrubby land out here.
At the far end of the site, there is a wonderful collection of Victorian buildings. You know, that beautiful ornate brickwork, beautiful arched windows, round windows, such attention to detail. But we're going to go into one of these because part of the story of the arsenal is tucked away in there, a vital part which will help us get a better idea of the scale of the arsenal when it was in full production. And on this site, Mike Jones from the Crossness Engines Trust is going to let us in. There's a bit of a whiff of sewage about the place, isn't it? I suppose that's always going to be here considering its history.
I don't notice it.
We're so well used to it. Do you have to pull these huge doors back?
No,
do
we can get in through here.
Oh yeah, there's a door within the big door. Right, okay. Oh, it's lovely and warm.
It's the boiler.
I need to find the piece of the arsenal that we're looking for.
Ah, yes.
Ian, what are we looking for?
Let's come over here and have a look at this large grey object. Now, what you're looking at here looks like a rather nondescript piece of steel. In fact, it is a vital part of the arsenal story. The Royal Arsenal grew to be an immense size. It was also always at the forefront of technology, so it was a very early adopter of the best transport systems. Therefore, as early as 1824, it opened a fairly significant railway system. It got up to be around about 15 miles long. But that wasn't quite what the military wanted ideally, because you can't get mainline railways around sharp curves. The only way you can get a railway around a sharp curve is to narrow the distance between the rails, giving a narrow gauge railway. And eventually the Royal Arsenal would have 70 miles of narrow gauge railway, and this locomotive, which appropriately is called Woolwich, is the last surviving narrow gauge Royal Arsenal steam locomotive.
But if there were so many trains and all those miles of track, only one left.
Only one narrow gauge one. This locomotive only survived because it was sold to a scrapyard that didn't cut up its steam locomotives.
It's appropriate that the Woolwich train is back here,
Yes.
in the Woolwich area.
Yes.
Yeah. And this tiny fragment of train that we have now, the Woolwich, that was an important part of that massive munitions production.
Very much so, because the Royal Arsenal was dependent upon its railway system, a completely 100% railway-dominated manufacturing complex.
And at its peak, how many people were employed at the arsenal?
The figure is just over 79,000 civilians working within the walls. In addition to that, you'd have had the military personnel, but there are also about 20,000 people working exclusively for the arsenal in the surrounding streets. So I think you could probably fairly say that the arsenal did make it to over 100,000 people working for it. And I don't believe any other British factory has ever got to that figure.
Hearing what Ian was saying, I'm just reminded that my wife's grandmother worked on the Royal Arsenal in munitions during the First World War. So there's a sort of link there, I suppose, a family link between Crossness and the arsenal.
What did she do?
She was making munitions. So it's a very dangerous pastime.
Yeah. And often a lot of women involved in it because
very
of
much
men
so,
being
yeah.
on
Men
the
were
front.
away at the front,
Yeah.
so it was women who were doing the work.
And really dangerous. These are in the early days of like cordite and highly explosive materials.
It was not understood quite how dangerous some of these materials were over the long term. And many of the women suffered from effectively acid poisoning. The ladies who were affected by the poisoning were known as canaries because they tended to go yellow, and in some occasions their hair would go either yellow or green. But the main problem that they were suffering from was that the acid would lodge in part of the body, and that part of the body was usually the lower jaw, and that would sometimes break whilst doing a simple task like eating, leaving them disfigured and disabled for the rest of their lives.
It's a very vivid picture of the intensity of work that went on with those women, but also with workers in general in that place to produce munitions. I've come west again. I've come to an area that's actually known as the Royal Arsenal. And here we have the most beautiful collection of some of the original Arsenal buildings. Very, very handsome, aren't they, Ian?
Yes.
And date back to when?
The oldest of these buildings goes back to 1696, but probably the most important one we can see in the distance is the Grand Store of 1806 to 1813, which is probably the finest Georgian warehouse in the country, if not the world.
They're beautiful, and then there are modern flats built in all around them, alongside the cannons that are set
Yes.
on the grass. You know, all the way here there's industry, there's housing, it's all built on, and it's being built on. We can hear construction going on in the
Yeah.
background.
Yeah.
And so much of the history of the Arsenal was being wiped away. Being able to keep the story alive, you need within that the human experience of being in the Arsenal, and that's what I'd like to find out about now.
Well, we're going to come and go and meet two fascinating gentlemen who worked here. One of them was an electrician in the Arsenal for a very, very long time and reached a senior position within that task within the Arsenal. And the other one was one of the last rounds of apprentices to have known the Arsenal at its zenith when it extended all the way right out to through Thamesmead to Crossness.
It's getting really cold now, so what we'll do is we'll meet them indoors.
Yes.
Inside the Heritage Centre would be good,
That's
I
right,
think.
Greenwich Heritage Centre.
Is he going to tease you mercilessly, Peter,
Well, I think
is he?
so. Well, I was 15, left school, 15 in a couple of months. I went to the local youth employment officer and said, he said, "What do you want to do, lad?" I said, "I want to be a farmer." Not a lot of call for that round of Woolwich. And then he gave me a letter to come down to Woolwich Arsenal to prove that I could ride a bicycle.
What?
Once I'd proven I could drive a bicycle, I was given a job as a messenger boy
With the post?
with the post.
And because they had the train system...
Yes, but I have been in a close encounter with a train because the train's running on the same line. My wheel catches in the tram line. I've come off and the tank has run over it. Well, I was pretty frightened what the man who dishes the bikes out was going to say to me.
I've come inside the Heritage Centre, and we're in a library area, which is at the end of the building, and you can just hear, you know, a bit of a howl round of wind outside. So it's quite nice to come into the shelter. And I'm with Ray Fordham and Peter Martin, and you were both employees in the Arsenal for quite a number of years, I believe. So Ray, when did you start? What age were you? And what were you doing?
Entered the MOD service in 1945 and I finished up in 1994.
I don't know how many years that is. It's an awful long time.
It's a long time.
So, Peter, you were peddling round all the different buildings.
Yeah.
You know, what were the sounds or the sights when you were doing that?
Incredible. There was. I mean, so we had manufacturing capability of building guns 60 foot long for the Royal Navy. They're massive, and there's tanks that are being manufactured down the tank shop, big bulldozer blades in front of them, with 165mm cannons in the front, demolition tanks, so they go forward and blow things up. Secret prototype things. This is part of the original place for the beginning of the British nuclear weapon, was Woolwich Arsenal.
Yeah. So there were secrets. It was a walled city.
What city?
I've heard the phrase used, a secret city, because things went on here that nobody was allowed to talk about.
that's what
Did that include you two?
Yeah, yeah.
You couldn't just walk about ad lib round the place. There was the police patrolling at different times. When we went round, if you went round some of the shops, if there was anything a little bit hush and so your job, there would be a tarpaulin put along the part of the road. You went round there, and in that section you didn't go in it.
A lot of employees had to sign an official Secrets
Act.
Act.
You was informed.
You was covered by it. Once you worked in here, you were covered by it.
Did you sign it, Peter?
Yes.
It was one of the things
I've
I
still-
think on
still
your
got a
terms of
copy at home.
employment.
Yeah.
It
Along
might
with
be
my
on
first
the
wage
terms
packet.
of employment. I can't remember mine, honestly.
Then, Peter, are there things that you can't tell me even to this day?
Yeah.
Well, that's why I say it's such an extensive bit of legislation. You don't know whether it's true or false.
Nothing.
You don't know what, yeah.
So you wouldn't risk saying, well, I know they made such and such there.
Only if it's in public domain.
But you were an electrician, Ray.
Yes.
So there were things known as the danger buildings. And safety, obviously, would be paramount. So you have experience of that,
Well,
Ray?
the workers had to change. They had to change in the flannel clothing with their number written on it for identification in case anything went wrong. And it was like a flame-proof material. You went into there. You was then registered what little buildings you were going in, so as you knew how many was in different buildings if there was an accident.
I can tell you about my father-in-law. He was 15 and he was working in the danger buildings about 1939 at the beginning. He was an apprentice, well, not an apprentice, just a lad. He worked with a skilled man, and what they were doing was filling shells up with magnesium. And the magnesium, once it's a flare, so it'd light the battlefield up. So he's doing this, but they were on piecework. The more you do, the greater the pay. Now, what had occurred there is that the magnesium shell was stuck in the former. Now, that's no good to him because he can't produce, so he's losing his piecework rate. But what you're supposed to do is to take that, put it outside the building in a bucket of oil, so somebody sorts it out next day. Well, he didn't. He set it about with a hammer, blew the roof off the shed, he lost his hand, and my father-in-law was flung down a ditch. He said he was nearly blind for 2 days after that. He'd rather cavalier the attitude, because at that time, right the way through to the end of the arsenal almost, at that time there's sometimes up to 20,000 tonnes of explosives on the arsenal.
Yeah.
20,000 tonnes.
When we came, we went to Tump 53 first.
Please, magazines, please.
I knew you'd say that.
I hate this word, Tumps. There was a magazine. I've got to be honest with you. We used to work on overtime, like on a Saturday, sometimes shifting machinery, and used to bring some bread with us, and we used to be down the moats round those magazines fishing, and we used to sneak off and go down there fishing, and it was a couple of hours till you went home,
So I know you don't like the word Tump, but now it's a lovely nature reserve, Tump 53.
Yeah.
And the story of it as an arsenal, it's just there. You see the formations are still there, the brick wall all round it and the moat. But it's very easy to forget that it was once part of the arsenal. It's a massive change in this now urban landscape. And what are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's just inevitable. The way our defence budget has disappeared. We're no longer running a quarter of the world with an empire. We're just a member of NATO to help share the burden. It's just an inevitable situation. We're running out of wars. We don't want wars, but conventional wars we don't have anymore. No, it's all cyber wars.
It helps us to look after plants and protect animals.
You mean coming to Tump 53 helps you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good, isn't it? And when you come to Tump 53, do you know what it used to be here before it's this lovely nature reserve?
No, not really.
Oh, well, it's a brilliant story. They used to make ammunitions here and cannons and tanks. That's what they did here. It was called an arsenal. Yeah, like the football club. Yeah? Yeah. That's what they did here. Whereas you're coming as a primary school and it's like a wild playground for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jane, you've got all the youngsters busy out collecting samples, looking for beasties. So here they are playing in a natural environment that has a very man-made history. Tump 53, the arsenal, the artillery, the manufacture of munitions. And yet here it is being something really constructive in the lives of young people.
Yeah, it's a really peaceful place now. You know, it's got space. It's because it was set aside, to be a sort of a safe place for ammunition. Now it's a safe place for children. And now all of the ammunition gone. It's an amazing turnaround to think that it has partly been recolonised back to the areas marshes it was, and now it's a whole world to explore for the children that they don't have in their schools. So it's a really good opportunity to let them know all these things so that they can, keep that memory and protect that history and that wildlife. Really.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Open Country was presented by Helen Mark and produced in Bristol by Nicola Humphreys.